Please join me in welcoming Dr. Joe Handelsman.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Come on, a little better than that. Great. It's really great to be here today, and it's incredibly wonderful to see all of you here today, because I believe the future is in your hands, and I know you're going to hear people say that all day, so I won't say it again. But yesterday we had the White House Science Fair at the White House, and it was the theme of the day that these incredible young people who are interested in science are going to make the world a better place. And I believe that you're a part of that team that is going to use science and technology and engineering and math to solve some of the big problems that we face today. So I wanted to bring a couple of messages to you today. First of all, I wanted to say hi from the White House. Everybody there says hello. And I'm sure the president would be here if he could, but he had a couple other things to do today. So sorry about that. You get me instead. I wanted to also just give you a message about what I think is the most important thing about getting into science, growing into science, becoming a scientist, and that's your own individuality. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what I do at the White House and hear your questions. The biggest thing I remember when I was your age was not fitting in. And I hope you don't find that. I hope you find that science is something lots of your friends do and they think it's really cool. But when I was growing up, I fell in love with microscopes when I was 12. So I saved up money. I did babysitting, which I hated, but I did it anyway for 6 months just to save up enough money to buy this little microscope that was really old. It was from a German hospital in 1939, but it worked beautifully. And I looked at pond water, and I made crystals of things, and I looked at hair. Everything I could find, I put under the microscope. And my friends, if I actually had any in those days, thought I was really weird. That was not something you were supposed to do as a teenager in New York. And so I did it anyway. And I thought, okay, I'm different, I'm shy. I spent all my time with microscopes and books, and I just figured I would never really fit in. And it took me until I got to college and then to graduate school to find people who loved science as much as I did and wanted to sit all day and look through a microscope. As ridiculous as that sounded to other people, that was what we loved. And so I became a microbiologist, and all of a sudden I found that I fit in because there were other people who loved what I did, what I loved, and would spend many hours a day at it. That's the thing about science and technology. It just draws you in. It makes you love what you're doing, and it makes you want to do more of it because you want to find out the next answer, or create the next thing, or invent something, or discover something. And there's that magic when no one in the world knows what you know. You make a little discovery, and you know you're the only person on Earth, or any other planet, to know that little piece of the world. And it's the most incredible feeling. And the same with technology. You invent something, and you know this was never created before, and I made it. And no matter how small or how insignificant some people may say it is, it's a big, big deal for you because it's your first step in becoming a creative, independent, innovative thinker and scientist or technologist. So I became a professor eventually, and I taught microbiology for many years, and I ran a research lab with lots of graduate students who did lots of great research, and I hope to go back to that next year when President Obama is done, and I'll be done as well. But I found that I was really interested in the policy of science, and I didn't really know I was interested in that until I was writing a paper one day, doing the things that scientists do, and this call came from the White House. And the president's science advisor, John Holdren, said, "I'd like you to come to the White House. The president would like you to be on our team of science advisors." And I said, "Me? What do I know? I just sit in the lab and do science and write about it and talk about it." He said, "No, we want ideas from scientists, so you should come." And it took him a few months to convince me, and my husband basically saying that I wasn't very patriotic if I turned the president down made me feel really guilty. And my nephews saying that they'd never speak to me again if I didn't do it. And I finally became convinced that this was an opportunity, even if I didn't think I had anything to offer. And what I found was that scientists always have something to offer, that when we become scientists, we learn a way of thinking. And that way of thinking can contribute to anything we do, any human endeavor. And so I've been able to contribute to the President's science team. And we do amazing things, like we run a science fair, like we did yesterday, and we have hundreds of kids coming and telling us the great science and technology that they're discovering and building. We also talk about how other countries might be using science in ways that aren't so good. But most of what we do is much more positive than that. We think about what are the fields that are growing and becoming really important that we have to be careful we're supporting because we want to be part of the future. And if we just support the science that we've always supported, then maybe we're not going to be on the cutting edge. So we try to keep an eye open for that so that the government is always at the forefront of science and leading it. And one of the fields that I've done that with is the microbiome, which is the study of communities of organisms, microorganisms that live together in big masses of microorganisms. And they live in all sorts of environments. They live in the ocean, they live on rocks. I think they probably live in Mars, but we haven't found that yet, but just wait. And they live right inside of us. One of the most important microbiomes in the world is inside of our bodies. Do you know we have more bacteria in us than we have human cells in us? So does that make us bacterial or human? Kind of gives us an identity crisis, right? So that's become a really important field. So this life that I started living when I was 12 of staring through microscopes has now, many years later, come into its own as this field of the microbiome. We're having a big meeting at the White House on the microbiome next month, bringing scientists from all over the country together to talk about what's next for the microbiome and how can we work together to tackle it. And I've discovered that the president is very interested in the microbiome. He talks about microbiology, and he cares about all of the modern science, and he's been briefed on all of these things. So here I've gone from this obscure field, looking at pond water under the microscope, to advising the President of the United States on microbiology and lots of other topics that are really important in science today. So the message is, even if you don't fit in, or if you do fit in, you can rise into all sorts of different places of science, and you can do all sorts of different things in science, and you don't expect what's coming along. The best part of being a scientist are the surprises, and those surprises are both in your research, because that's the best part of science, is we don't know the answer. That's why we're looking for it, and those surprises are incredible, because nature tells us things we never would have guessed if we were trying to imagine how it worked on our own. But the other surprises are in our lives. I mean, who would have ever thought that this shy little girl from New York would end up in the White House working on science policy? So you never know where your life's going to go. Be open to the opportunities, and I congratulate all of you on finding your way to science and technology so early. This looks like an incredible couple of days you're going to have, so enjoy it. Savor every minute. I wish I could be here for the whole thing, because I saw some of those exhibits that you're going to see, and they're pretty amazing. I want to get inside that helicopter. I hope some of you do. So if there's a minute or two left, I maybe could take a couple questions, if you have any. I can't see, so yes.
Any thoughts on the policies coming out of the White House from the dangers of the Zika virus?
The dangers of Zika. So yeah, my group works on Zika along with a very large team. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, Zika is a virus that's carried by mosquitoes, and it's been recently shown to cause microcephaly in fetuses, which is a very small brain. And so when pregnant women get infected with it, it can be very serious. Otherwise, it doesn't really cause any serious diseases for most people. And the issue is that we don't have a way of controlling the virus right now. We only have a way of controlling the mosquito that carries it. And so the best way that we have is to keep water sources low and dry. So like even the pots around plants carrying a little bit of water is enough space for the mosquitoes to breed in. They can breed, this particular mosquito can breed in a bottle cap of water. They need very little water. So we have to try to keep free water from standing. We have to, in some cases, use insecticides inside our houses because the mosquitoes like to hang out inside, unlike some of the other mosquitoes. And we need to use repellents, which are one of the biggest tools we have for any kind of insect-borne disease, is to make sure that the insects don't like coming near us. In the meantime, we're working very, very hard. Many scientists across the country and across the world are studying the virus itself to try to make vaccines so that even if someone gets infected, they won't get sick from it. They'll be able to fight it off, and also treatments for it. So for the coming year, I think we're going to see quite a bit of Zika infections in the southern part of this country, and particularly in Puerto Rico, the Caribbean, some of the areas that have a lot of mosquito infestations. But I think in the short term, we will only have mosquito control. In the longer term, we'll be able to control the virus itself. So great question, something I spend a lot of time on.
So you said something about humans having more bacteria than cells. What are your opinions? Are we bacteria or are we human?
I'm sorry, could somebody repeat that? I couldn't hear it.
So you said that we have more bacteria. Are we bacteria or are we humans?
Oh, are we? Oh, great question. Yeah, sure. I don't know. What do you think?
I'd say if bacteria makes up, how many percent of our body does it make up?
We have trillions and trillions of bacteria inside of us.
Okay, so I'd say that cells, because bacteria is something that cells we get from the millions and millions of years of evolution and science. So bacteria, it clings onto us or it goes onto us. I say we're more human than bacteria.
You're more human. All right, I think I would agree. But the fact is that we're humans who are dependent upon bacteria. So bacteria are actually your friends. We wouldn't survive if we didn't have the bacteria that live in us and on us. And there's evidence now coming that makes it look like bacteria play a role in all sorts of diseases, from diabetes to obesity to autism. And they probably protect us from most of those diseases. And when something goes wrong, that's when we get those diseases. So I think we're human. I agree with you. Good answer. But we're also humans that can't live on our own. We're, the old phrase, it takes a village. It takes a village of bacteria to run a human body. So we depend on them, but we're probably not them.
Well, I think we have one more question,
okay.
and then we'll wrap up here and get you guys to the other wonderful speakers. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, did you aid the president in making a decision in the Ebola outbreak in earlier 2014?
Yeah, I was on a large team of people who worked on Ebola and figured out where it was coming from, what we could do about it, what groups from within the United States, the Centers for Disease Control, the military, all sorts of different groups that went in to Africa to help, which ones would be doing what part of the job. And then we monitored it very carefully. And there are now a few cases of Ebola coming back, and we're monitoring that very carefully, but it seems to be under control.
All very good